Yeah, are we muted during that?
Yeah.
Oh.
Not right now.
Oh.
Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jason Tucker, and this is episode number 362 of WPwatercooler, Why You Should Client-Proof a WordPress Website. Sponsored by ServerPress, makers desktop server. Check them out at serverpress.com. I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me over at Jason Tucker on Twitter. My website is jasontucker.blog.
I'm Steve Zango. I'm the founder of Zeek Interactive, and I run the OC WordPress meetup.
I'm Sadie Reed. I make WordPress, teach WordPress, preach WordPress at Sadie Reed Media on all the things.
My name is Russell Aaron. I do things with WordPress in Las Vegas.
It's Jason Cosper, aka Fat Momoweg.
Check us out at patreon.com/WPwatercooler. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and click the bell. It'd be cool because then you'll be notified when we go live, which happened to me. It was so weird. I was like, what's going live? Oh yeah, it's me. That's awesome.
All I can think now is ring the bell. Ring the bell. Oh wait, does that mean we just copyrighted?
I can't hit the high part on that
one. So yeah, we're gonna be talking about the why of why you should be yeah, why.
Yeah.
The why.
That's not a why.
Yeah, that's an M. You literally made
an
M. So why is the big one? You put your arms
visual
out.
Jokes we're here for the visual jokes on this podcast.
Oh man. So yeah, let's begin. So last week we talked about how you should, and we thought we would go around and say why we should, right, Steve?
Yes.
Like why we should actually do this?
Because we're paid.
I think it's
what did we talk about last week?
Answer.
Well, why you should, how you, how you should client proof a website.
What day is it?
How
are you? What show are we on?
Every day's the same.
So I think to start off with this, why you should do it. I think for me, it's more along the lines of like making sure that the client doesn't break the website I literally just developed for them and spent months on putting together and getting going. So that would probably be like my reason why. But I don't know if that's the client's reason why.
Unless you're trying to break the internet.
Well, it's also to I hate to say it this way, but to save them from themselves, right?
Yeah, I was going to say that. Protect them.
Yeah. My clients like to tinker. A lot of my clients like to tinker, right? And so as soon as you give them over a WordPress website, they're going to start messing with things, right? And if you can make it so that there are less things to break or less things that can go wrong, you should do that.
I actually have a question about that
Sure.
because we talked about this briefly a couple of months ago. I don't really remember when. Some episode ago. Go search on Google. About Gutenberg, and we were talking about that Gutenberg is actually, fairly gives a lot of power that they didn't have before. It was just the text editor to the user. And, I've been thinking a lot about this because I haven't built a full, I've implemented Gutenberg in some components on sites, but those are mostly sites that I'm doing that build on. And I haven't turned over a full Gutenberg site to a client yet. And I'm wondering, Steve and or whomever, are you styling every block? Are you how are you client proofing? I guess we should say why, but how are you client proofing Gutenberg?
How are we client proofing?
Like all the different blocks so that they show up and they can't build a monstrosity, but can still stay within the site styles.
Yeah, that depends, right? And so
my favorite answer.
Yeah, some of the default Gutenberg blocks and some of the ones that come with some of the libraries that we've mentioned give you some design capabilities, right? Not a full page builder, but there are some design capabilities like color choices, font choices, things along those lines. And so I actually haven't client proofed a Gutenberg site, but I would look to ways to limit those font choices, color choices, sizing choices to match a style guide, right? All of this, I think all of this really kind of stems from having a style guide, staying true to a style guide, establishing a style guide, coming up with protocols so that as you moving forward, the things that you add or your client adds to the site match that style guide, right? As soon as you start introducing design choices, you have the ability to fall outside of a style guide, and that's where things start to break. And I just did air quotes for anybody who's listening on audio.
Because it doesn't necessarily break the site functionality; it breaks the site's what would you even call it? I guess design, but in a way, it's look, but not necessarily its design, but it's cohesiveness is what it actually breaks, right? And all of a sudden, if you're on a page and you're like, what's this font? Why is this font in this color? And now suddenly we're back in Word, and every letter is different color. But you can't do that, at least with Gutenberg. You can't change all the letters. You can only change per block. So there's, that's good at least.
And since we're in this industry and we kind of deal with this every day in all these design things, it's easy for us to say, okay, well, here's what's wrong with this website. You look at a page and you say, okay, this font is different. This color doesn't match, right? This is out of ADA compliance because the contrast is wrong.
Right.
And so, it's easy for us on this call to spot that, right? It's not as easy for our clients to spot it, right? So they may look at a page and say, well, something feels different or feels off or feels wrong, but they can't articulate specifically what went wrong, right?
And they'll hit publish.
Those things are more subtle.
Yeah, and they'll hit publish, and then their clients, their customers will go to that site, and it just doesn't feel as professional. It doesn't feel as cohesive. And then, that's like kind of, it's not so much that they break the site, is that it's a slow degradation of the prototype. And I think that is over worth. It's like a drip, 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 like that takes away from the impact and the full something.
And ultimately,
well, it's like you were saying that. Yes, you're saying that last week. Is that you don't claim the website after you've handed it off to the client, which I totally get because I have the same problem where it's like you built the site, you made it look great, you gave it to them, and then they figured out how to get in and start changing things. That it's like it's great. I want them to change stuff, but then especially with Gutenberg, if you start moving around a bunch of blocks and stuff that were not styled the way that they should have been, essentially you're having to build like an entire theme with every single known piece, or build a video game with every level that the person's going to go to, regardless if they'll make it to there or not.
I mean, building custom themes is one thing, but like I have always, we talked about this last week too, have used like fields if we need something to be in a certain, if this word or this title or this section of the page needs to be in a certain font or design element, then we put it in a different field so that it automatically does that, and the client isn't responsible for styling that. But with Gutenberg, it really doesn't allow for that so much, which is one of my big hesitations currently. Is why I was asking, because this is actually a dilemma I am currently facing.
So let's bring it back around to the why, right? The reason this is important is because if your client or if anybody has the ability to break away from their brand or their style guide or make the site feel less professional, right? It's going to affect your business, right? And these are a little bit more
business.
Their business, yeah. But that's what I mean. I mean their business, right? It's a little bit more indirect, right? But if the site doesn't feel cohesive or professional or it's off-brand or any of the things that we just described, then the perception is that the brand or the company isn't as professional as they're trying to convey. If it's an e-commerce site, right, now your site feels a little bit less professional, and that's going to affect your sales.
The word
that's ultimately the result here.
It feels janky.
Janky is perfect. That's a great word. That is actually the technical term for it.
That's the technical term. You're like, this site feels a little janky. I'm not sure I want to give them my credit card. Like that's the and if something can look totally professional and actually be sketched and not even selling you anything, but you're like, I feel comfortable. Well, not me, or probably us, but people are like, I feel comfortable putting my credit card in here because it looks good. It looks like something's happening here, versus a perfectly legitimate small business site that may not look right. And then it raises those red flags for the client.
It's the difference between going into the Apple store and going into Fry's, right?
That's a good one.
Right? The Apple store, it just feels a certain way. You walk in there, right? And everything is on brand. It's cohesive. It's consistent. It just, there's a certain feeling, right? And you pay more as a result. You walk into Fry,
and then you disappear because it doesn't exist anymore.
That's
maybe not Fry's now.
I'm thinking about Fry's, right? I'm thinking has anybody been to a Fry's recently? There's a whole blog post.
Yeah, it's great. They sell soda.
No,
they sell soda
that's
now.
the thing.
Oh,
this is a tangent, but do a search on YouTube for I think it's Fry's walkthrough. Right before COVID hit, there was a whole investigative report on Fry's. I went into a Fry's about 3 months ago. Fry's are empty, but they're still there.
And they all have that weird design, like the moonscapes or whatever they've got.
It's not even that. Like they're not stocked anymore, and there's nobody working there. You walk in, it's like a ghost town. It's very weird. Anyway, that's a tangent. Fry's has become
an example of a website that if you walk in and it doesn't feel right, you're like, what's going on here? Are these people going to actually ship my product to me, or is this someone I want to trust my business to? That's why.
Well, I think for instance, if we went back to the e-commerce side of things, let's say that you classified everything with certain categories, and the person went and created a whole new category and maybe didn't set it up right so that that new category would automatically show up on the website. So they start throwing everything inside, like kids' toys, like boys' toys, and then you put in girls' toys. But then they made another one that's like male toys or I know.
Keep going, Jason.
No, keep going. You're
Try this one out.
Wait, Jason. How do you tell if it's a male toy or not?
But let's just say that you classified this incorrectly. So on the website's expecting things to show up in this one category, but they got into a totally different category.
Right.
If you didn't set up the site to say like show all categories on the page on this one category list, and also make it so that when you go into that category, it has maybe the header and it has all the pieces that it needs to have in there. The person, you have their customer going on the site and they're looking for a specific thing. The header is going to be missing because it wasn't in there and it's expecting it. The category maybe not even showing up in the list because you have a very, finite list of categories. Things like that would make their site look bad, and maybe they're launching a new product and now no one's buying it because it wasn't set up appropriately.
I would argue that you need to style all of your category archive. So if they do make a category, it will show up properly and not just break. Actually, a current client site that I have, they create that I've been detangling for like forever. They have some page templates set up that are like super hard coded. They're page templates, but if you just create a page, it's like what is even there's like it's all sorts of chaos and nothing's on there right, and there's no header, and it's like you can't just make a page, and all of the page templates are specific to specific pages. So they've created a site where you just can't make new pages. It doesn't even they're like, we don't even know how to make a page, which is kind of, I would argue, one of the most default aspects of a website.
Yes, but the more you give the ability to add features where the end user gets lost, right, or has more clicks to get to the destination, the more, again, it affects sales, especially on an e-commerce site. The more I argue that if you don't have a way to just get to the buy page very quickly, get to the product page very quickly, you're going to affect sales.
Or the call to action page, whatever that happens to be.
Or just having a call to action, right? A consistent call to action should be part of your style guide.
I also, with the creating the pages, not to talk about the call to action, but do you have clients who just create pages that are in now no order? There's no subpage. They're just like the page list becomes just this like monstrosity of drafts and duplicated pages and pages that aren't in their sub-page proper parent header. And it's just like you go in there and you're like, what are you even doing in here? This is 10,000 pages.
So switching gears for a
That
second.
goes back to the style guide, because it's not just about style and design in my mind. It's really about workflow. Like when you're
content structure.
Content structure. This isn't just how the site looks, because that's what everyone thinks when they talk about design. But design is so much more than just the colors and the look, right? It's how do these pages fit together, and how does this content fit together? So I would argue that a style guide is even a limiting term for it, because that doesn't imply that you should look there for the workflow of creating a new category or creating a new page, and that should have some structure as well. Like if you're going to create a new page, you need to be able to be sure that it, these pages go here and these pages go here, and that's one way to proof it. What were we going to say, Steve? Sorry.
I was going to say, just switching gears for a minute, one of the things that we turn off on all of our client sites, some don't care and some hate it, is we turn off the ability to add new plugins.
That's smart.
Right? And we do that because when you add a plugin, if you just add a plugin and activate it, you are at that point cowboy coding, right? You are adding new code. You are adding new code to the website. Updating plugins, we disable that as well. Updating plugins is, again, it's cowboy coding. You're adding code that you haven't tested to a website. So A, you could break the website. B, adding new plugins willy-nilly is just a bad idea, right? Any plugins, but especially plugins that have an effect on the front end, right? And specifically, I'm talking about plugins that add JavaScript to your site. You don't know what kind of effect that's going to have on your website.
I have a client who, they're someone I help with their website anyway, and they brought someone on to help them build out some pages, and that person was trying to solve some problem. I had nothing to do with this, and they installed a caching plugin, and then caching plugin did not solve that problem. But what I did do was somehow, and I haven't quite figured this out yet, because of course I have to go in and untangle it, is remove page revisions. So now the page revisions are not there, and then the client needed to go back to a previous version of the page, and I'm like, where'd your page revisions go? Now that's just disappeared, and now we're just basically untangling this whole thing, because that plugin was put in there with no knowledge of what that plugin was even going to do, and it was done as a test. Just like, let's see if this works. Let's throw some spaghetti on the wall. And, it's a live site.
That's literally what it is.
It's literally what it is. They're like,
page revisions is a huge one. Yeah. I don't know how many times I went to a meetup where we talked about turning off page revisions because it adds bloat. Yeah, it adds bloat. It's essentially making a revision, for every time you change something on, one of those posts. Users need that. People like us, we come up with our own ways of making sure we don't break something before we, change it. But yeah, plenty of them do, and they need to hit that undo button.
I still break stuff all the time, even though I have. I
was trying to make it sound good. Else. Come on, Prosper.
No.
Sometimes you can just click on your keyboard and it sends you off that page, and you're like, oh shoot, it didn't have a backup, it didn't have the autosave, I need that. Like, that could be like a hand slip. That doesn't necessarily have to be like you don't know what you're doing. That means you close the window, or it should ask you if you close.
This is why I don't blog.
As someone who's worked as someone who's worked in web hosting for ages and has had to run departments of tech support people, a lot of solutions, when somebody, comes along and says, hey, my site is slow, this is slow, that is, things aren't doing what they should be doing. Half the time, and not everybody, but hosts often go, oh, we'll try this plugin out. And Steve immediately is shaking his head, shaking her head. Like, yeah,
don't do that.
Oh, yeah. Just install this optimized plugin. Just install this. Just add a caching plugin.
Or just turn off all your plugins to see which one the problem is. That's the other truth. Just go ahead and shut them all down. I'm sure it won't affect anything at all.
What could possibly go wrong?
I don't know. And then turn them all back on and see if you notice a difference.
One of the other things.
This is a problem though in terms of DIYing your own website, right? Like even it's not just WordPress, but obviously WordPress really the whole core thing here is that you can do it yourself. You're doing this site, but I think what it really comes down to is after you can, and you totally can, but should you? Should you do it if you don't? Should you be installing plugins if your income depends on that site, right? Like this is a level. If nothing depends on it, if it's like what Jason always talks about, your grandma's cat blog, and it doesn't matter, install all the plugins all day. But if people are coming to that site and they're forming opinions of your business, and it affects your branding, and it affects your employees and your livelihood, then you probably shouldn't just be winging it with this aspect of the site. Like you wouldn't wing your taxes. You know what I mean? Well, maybe some people wing their taxes. You shouldn't wing your taxes.
You shouldn't. Don't wing your taxes. If there's one takeaway from today's show, don't wing your taxes.
Oh no, that's it, really?
Yeah, no. I was going to say, I mean, again, back to the why. I mean, the reason you don't want to just install plugins, or you also don't want to necessarily update or install plugins on your production server is, A, it could cause your site to be slow, right? For many reasons. There's all kinds of reasons that can happen, right? It can cause bloat. It can cause your site to crash, right? Your site could just go down because you're adding plugins. But one of the background issues that I'm concerned about is, let's say you're in Say's situation where somebody's just testing a plugin. You activate a plugin, you deactivate a plugin, right? Just to see what it does, right? What you're not realizing is that plugin may have just added 10 tables to your database.
Right.
And they're just sitting there.
They're just
right? They're now there, right? And that by itself is not really a problem, but I've taken on projects, inherited projects before, where and one of the first analyses we do is we look at the database, and we look at all the tables in the database and compare it to the active plugins, right? Because I want to know what tables are not necessary anymore. And sometimes I'm not exaggerating here, I've had 100 extra tables in a database that just were not necessary because of plugins that used to be active at one time or were tested and are now no longer there. And so there's a lot of effects that plugins have on your server that you might not know about. Or
even possibly worse is they leave them all on. In the case of there's like multiple slider plugins that are all on. I have one site that has actually an active client site. This is the one we're retangling. It has multiple 301 redirect active plugins.
Well, that gives you better redirection. More redirection plugins gives you better redirection, right?
They're both being used.
I'm being sarcastic.
Like, I don't even know what is happening. So like I can't even detangle it because
oh my God.
What is even happening there? Like that is like, this is one of those things where I'm like, we just have to scrap this. And the hard part is explaining that to the client because they can't tell what the value of that is. And so explaining to them that you have to detangle something that they can't see and they don't understand the impact of, that's maybe one of my most complicated parts of my work, is to be like, well, this thing you can't see is really important and, it's causing problems. And they're like, is that causing the problem that's right in front of my face right this second? I'm like, no, but it will cause more problems. And it's probably related to that problem. But
go ahead, Casper.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Casper. Take it away.
I was just going to make a joke about two 301 plugins. That's like a 602 redirect. That's way better.
Oh man!
Listen, I just for the audience, and this is a running joke on this show. More redirection plugins is not better, right? More slider plugins,
more SEO plugins,
more caching plugins is not better. More SEO plugins, you need one of each, if at all, right? I recommend 0 slider plligins, but if you're going to use a slider plugin, use one.
Do not use relative
one, not more than one.
Revolution. Oh my Lord, it is a nightmare. I don't know if you have inherited on any sites. I've never installed it on anything, but it is And I don't usually, we don't usually single out specific products, but
and so multiple SEO plugins can actually cause your site to have real problems. Multiple caching plugins can actually cause your site not to work, right? And so these things are important.
I mean, the 301 thing is definitely a problem, because if you don't know where the site is, it could really impact your SEO, and this could really just impact even your site functionality. You're like trying to build a page, and you're like, why does this page keep going to some other page? And it's some hidden thing on a plugin you don't even know you're using because it's buried in settings.
Well,
and they don't even realize that it's on.
If you're using Yoast Premium, I think it is, redirections included, right? In Yoast Premium.
And
but
that's the way to do it, is to use one plugin that can do, because 301 redirects are an SEO issue. And so using it is part of an SEO plugin, and not installing another whole plugin that you have to maintain and update and monitor, I think is worth the extra dollars.
Oh, and Cosper, correct me if I'm wrong here. I may not get the technology right, but having 301 redirects as a piece of software, as a plugin, is inferior to actually having a host that does it at the server level, right? And so if you're with somebody like a WP Engine, for instance, and it's the only one I can think of offhand that actually gives you a panel for redirects within your hosting environment, that's actually a better solution than a software solution.
It absolutely is. Basically, you're doing things at the Nginx level. It doesn't even need to hit PHP at all at that point. So basically, So basically, the web server sees the request, it comes in. It doesn't have to spin up a PHP process and then add all of that overhead. So if you can do a server level redirect, that's way better. But that is for the people. My ride's here. I'm sorry, it just in the background. I'm not sure if you heard that.
They're like, get out of here, Cosper.
Yeah.
I have a quick question, actually. This is more of a technical question. Do you use anything, Steve, for short links? It just made me think of it.
For short links?
Yeah, like to create like something that doesn't have the full page title, which might be the SEO title, but
externally I use tinyurl.
Just that.
Yeah.
Nothing for the site specifically.
I use one called URLs.
URLs?
I use one called URLs. YOURLS.
Oh.
And it runs outside of WordPress and outside of everything, but there's plugins that will use the API for it to do it. But yeah, that's a really good one.
Sort
Why
of
are you asking?
Related. What?
Why are you asking?
Just because it occurred to me when we were talking about that, and I thought you might have an answer. That wasn't a very good answer, but
sorry. they can't all be winners.
Sometimes I like to use you instead of Google. That's all. I like
as Jason's done to me in the past, he'll send you a link on letmegooglethatforyou.com.
Right, exactly. I mean, I could have just done that. Just burning those last 2 minutes, because it's just the end part of the show is like, can Say get some advice, please, real quick, just on what you guys are using?
Right, within the last 4 minutes.
It's lmgtfy.com. Yeah. Jason has sent me several of those.
What do you think about?
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's what I think. Dun, dun, dun. Can we put that at the end? Like
awesome.
The little jingle too.
Yeah. Jingle.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what I think.
Perfect.
The more, it's like
I'll
the more
make sure that happens right this second. Here we go. And subscribe to us on YouTube and click the bell as well. Also, just so you know, this is a podcast as well as just a YouTube channel and a Facebook video. So you can go and follow us on any of these different places that you can download a podcast. Awesome. Talk to y'all later, folks. You have a good one. Bye.
Have a good weekend or week or day.
Every day's the same.